So in part 1, the Apocryphon of John basically gave us the origin story of the system. A higher template exists. The rulers can't originate it, so they copy it. They try to harness light by building a human vessel. Awakening happens, and then the system reacts like any system does when it realizes it's losing control. Now, part 2 is where we stop talking about the prison in theory and start reading the case file on the wardens. This text is called Hypostasis of the Archons, which basically means the underlying reality of the rulers. And it's not subtle. It's like someone took the Eden story and said, "You think this is a children's moral tale? Cool, let's talk about power." What this book is, in plain language. If the Apocryphon of John is cosmology, Hypostasis is tactics. It's less, here's the architecture of the heavens, and more, here's how the rulers behave when humans start waking up. And if you've ever wondered why awakening tends to get framed as rebellion, pride, danger, or evil, this book is basically an argument that those labels are part of the control strategy. First big theme, rulers don't create, they imitate. This is the connective tissue between John and this text. In Genesis, creation looks clean. God speaks, things exist, humans are formed in God's image. In the Apocryphon and Hypostasis, it's messier. The rulers aren't creating from fullness. They're copying a higher design they don't understand. They're trying to replicate what they can't originate. So when you hear "made in the image" in this worldview, it's not automatically comforting. It can sound like, we made a copy to manage the light, and that leads to the next theme. Second theme, control doesn't begin with chains. It begins with a narrative. In these texts, the Archons aren't presented as omnipotent. They're presented as managerial, bureaucratic, a hierarchy. Their greatest tool isn't raw force, it's misdirection. They want humans to believe the rulers are the source, the system is ultimate, and anything that threatens the system is evil. It's like the oldest trick in the book. If you can define the dictionary, you can define the world. And that takes us back to Eden, because Eden is where definitions get installed. Eden, but now it's about surveillance. In Hypostasis, Eden looks less like a peaceful garden and more like a monitored space. And the text leans into an uncomfortable idea. The rulers don't just want obedience. They want possession, access, and use. This is where I am going to be careful, because the text includes coercive and sexualized imagery. I'm not going to narrate it in graphic detail, but I'm also not going to pretend it isn't there. The reason it's there is important. Through reproduction, through humiliation, through taking what it didn't create. So the Archons in Hypostasis aren't just evil demons, they're a picture of predatory power. If someone asks, why would an ancient text go there? The answer might be, because some people experienced power that way, and when you read it as a think piece, that's the point. The text is describing what oppressive systems do when they see a population waking up. Eve shifts from cause of the fall to threat to the regime. Here's one of the most important comparative moments with the Bible. In a lot of mainstream readings, Eve becomes the symbol of temptation, disobedience, and blame. In Hypostasis, Eve becomes closer to an awakening figure. She's tied to insight, agency, clarity, and the rulers respond to her like she's dangerous. If a story consistently paints clarity as the threat, it's worth asking what kind of world that story thinks we live in. Because it's not just don't do evil, it's don't see. The rulers mask. They impersonate divinity. One of the sharpest ideas in this text is that the rulers impersonate what humans instinctively seek. People want God, truth, protection, and meaning. So the rulers don't always show up as monsters. Sometimes they show up as authorities, as holy, as law, as the voice that says, "Trust me, I speak for God." That's a big shift from how many people imagine evil. We want evil to look obvious. A villain, a horned thing. These texts suggest evil often looks like administration, like righteousness, like certainty, like a system that tells you your discomfort is proof you're wrong. Why awakening gets punished in this story? If we connect part 1 and part 2, the logic is clean. Humans contain light. The rulers can't originate. Knowledge is the human remembering their true origin. That memory breaks the ruler's jurisdiction. So the rulers respond with pressure, shame, and containment. That's why these texts keep treating awakening like it's criminal, not because knowledge is evil, because knowledge is a jailbreak. And what do wardens do when they detect a jailbreak? They don't debate philosophy, they tighten the perimeter. The psychological read, if you don't take it literally, even if you don't believe in Archons as literal lion-serpent beings, the metaphor still hits. Archons can name the forces that govern people: fear, shame, compulsions, propaganda, groupthink, abusive authority structures. So when the text says rulers are trying to keep you asleep, you can read it as social systems that punish dissent, families that punish growth, relationships that punish boundaries, inner patterns that punish clarity. Whatever your level of belief, the tactic list stays recognizable. The punchline of hypostasis. If Apocryphon of John says the creator is a lesser ruler, hypostasis of the Archons adds, here's how lesser rulers behave when they're threatened. They imitate what's higher, they control the narrative, they punish awakening, they use shame and coercion. They impersonate divinity, and they want you to confuse their authority for ultimate truth. And if that feels bleak, the text does something interesting. It assumes the rulers act this way because they're insecure. Because they know the light doesn't belong to them, and that's why they fear it. Where this sets up part 3, so here's what we've built so far. Part 1 gave us the origin of the system and the human spark. Part 2 gave us the rulers' methods, how the wardens keep the prison running. Now part 3 is where the voice changes, because the next text, the Apocalypse of Adam, isn't a system blueprint or a tactics manual. It's closer to a testimony. It's Adam speaking to Seth, describing how the rulers rewrite history, how salvation keeps showing up as forbidden knowledge, and how the light keeps slipping past the perimeter. So if part 1 made you think, and part 2 made you uncomfortable, part 3 is where it starts to sound like a warning. Keep watching. Because the Adam episode is where this trilogy turns from what the system is into what the system does to people across time.